Hi. Good morning, everyone. Sorry, I think we're going to get started here. If you could find your seats. Welcome to the 2018 State of the City. I wanted to let everyone know we are live streaming today, so thank you for joining us on your Saturday morning. I know it's not always easy, so thank you. My name is Nadine Nader. I'm an assistant city manager with the City of Santa Clara, and I just want to take a few minutes to go over the agenda for the day, if it works here. That's okay, you should probably have one in front of you. We'll figure this out, but thank you. Mayor Gilmore, on behalf of the City Council today, will be presenting an informational presentation on the state of the city, as well as our fiscal outlook. Thank you. And she'll be followed by our city manager, Deanna Santana, and our city manager will be talking about the city's key initiatives and the council's strategic pillars. After that, we will have some time for questions, and so we'll take those at the end of the presentations. And I did want to note for the audience that this, just as a reminder, this event is not political in nature and is being held to provide information on the state of the city. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to the mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadine, and thank you all for coming this morning. This is the first of its kind for us here in the City of Santa Clara. So welcome to the 2018 State of the City. We're doing something a little bit different this year. In the past, the State of the City was held by a business organization in Santa Clara, and it was a nice event. However, almost no residents attended the State of the City event. So that didn't seem right to me or the council. So we wanted to open up the State of the City so that Santa Clara residents would be able to attend. I wanted to bring them into different neighborhoods and to make it easier for residents to be able to attend the State of the City. So that's why we're here today, and we're coming to 3 additional neighborhoods after today. This afternoon we'll be at the Community Recreation Center. Next Saturday we'll be at Calajon School in North Santa Clara, and then the following Monday at the Senior Center in downtown Santa Clara. So I wanted City Hall to be able to reach out to the neighborhoods, and I wanted City Hall to be able to engage our residents. I want City Hall to be more open and transparent and available to the residents. So as mayor, those items are a top priority for me because Santa Clarans deserve better from our government. I became mayor in 2016. I was appointed after former Mayor Jamie Matthews resigned. And there has been a lot of changes in the last couple of years. The most obvious is that we have now a female majority city council that you'll see up here, which was different from before. In fact, 5 of the 6 members of our council are female now. So I want to pause for a minute and talk about the council members that are here. So first we have Vice Mayor Kathy Watanabe. If you'd like to stand, Kathy. Kathy was appointed and then elected in 2016. Kathy represents, or is from North Santa Clara. The North Side is one of the first council members to represent the North Side in Santa Clara, so it's a really important job. Many in the North Side call her the mayor of the North Side. In fact, even I call her the mayor of the North Side. So she really has become a very effective council member and takes her job very seriously and is a wonderful representative for the residents of Santa Clara. Next to Kathy, we have council member Debbie Davis. So Debbie is on her 2nd term. She was elected in 2012 and re-elected in 2016. And Debbie received an enormous number of votes. I mean, it was unbelievable. So really, she's probably the most popular person in the room right now. So I'm going to ask her for advice in the upcoming year. But Debbie is a very active council member in our city, and she runs our marketing for the city, and she's all about putting a positive image on Santa Clara and engaging stakeholders in the community to really get things done. So thank you, Debbie, for all your hard work in Santa Clara. And next to Debbie, we have Councilmember Teresa O'Neill. I'll call her, although we all work very hard, but she's really a hard-working council member in our city. And Teresa has a couple of roles that are very important for our community. She's actually the vice chair of the Valley Transportation Authority, the VTA, and we're hoping next year she will be the chair of the VTA, and maybe we can get some things done for Santa Clara in terms of road improvements and traffic. So she is our real expert here on transportation issues. She also represents us at our Silicon Valley Power electric utility. She's a representative, so she represents us in Sacramento, in Washington. She advocates for our electric utility, which is a really important business here in Santa Clara. So among all the other things that she does, those are two of her main roles, and she's our analyst on the council. If we want to know something, we say, Teresa, what's your opinion on this? And she'll research it for 17 hours and let us know. So she's very valuable, as well as all the other councilwomen that are here today. So thank you all for coming this morning. I'm proud to serve with these council members. I really am. And all of them are committed to good government. They really are. And they all believe in transparency and openness in our city. And perhaps most importantly, they're all very brave and they have a lot of guts. And I think that's something that's unusual for politicians in this day and age, to have a lot of guts, because there's a lot of changes that are happening in Santa Clara, and they're really supporting the reform that we're trying to do in the city. So we have been criticized for making a lot of changes at City Hall, and I'm sure some of you have heard about that or read about that. But we work really hard to make sure we always represent the residents of the city. We've been criticized for enforcing Measure J. Measure J was the 2010 vote that the people of Santa Clara had when we wanted a stadium. But we all know we must protect the city's general fund. I mean, that's just a given. We fought to enforce the measure, and will continue to do so, because we have to manage the 49ers and not have the 49ers manage Santa Clara. So that's what we're doing. Thanks. We've been questioned about enforcing a curfew to protect our neighborhoods for people who prioritize money over quality of life. But we will continue to protect our neighborhoods, especially those on the north side and all over Santa Clara, because it's the right thing to do. We've been criticized for conducting audits and establishing strong fiscal controls on major city contracts, because no one's ever done that before, and we're doing it now. And we will continue to be strong watchdogs, because our residents demand it and they need it. We've been questioned for trying to stop dark money from entering city politics. But we took a bold step, because we became the first city to enact an anti-dark money ordinance, because we want clean elections in Santa Clara. We've been criticized for refusing to contribute millions of dollars for a major college football game in Levi Stadium. But we've refused to do what every other city has done before us, and used major taxpayer dollars for a major corporate event that doesn't need it. We were threatened with the possible loss of our youth soccer park and Ulistack natural area, because we've refused to make a backroom deal. But then we passed a ballot measure that says the people of Santa Clara must vote on, and therefore can stop the sale of our existing city parks. I believe that working with my colleagues, we have helped make change at Santa Clara that has helped make Santa Clara a better place, so thank you. And we cannot do all of these things in our city without strong city management. I'm happy to say that we have a new management team, and they're a group of very talented and dedicated public servants. And you know, I've been involved in city government for almost 5 decades. All right, I'm not that old, but although some may say, ask my kids, but my father was mayor in the 60s and 70s, and I've spent a lot of time around City Hall, either as a commissioner, elected official, or the daughter of a public official. And I can say with authority that Santa Clara has one of the best management teams now that we've ever had at City Hall. So thank you. Thank you. So I'd like to introduce some of them. First, we have, I'm still going to say our new city manager, although it's been a few months, Deanna Santana is our new city manager. Walter Rossman, our Chief Operating Officer. There's Walter. Ruth Shikata, Assistant City Manager. Manuel Pineda, Assistant City Manager. And you met Nadine Nader, who, here she is, also Assistant City Manager. Because we have this strong leadership team, we also have numerous other city employees and department heads that we can brag about because they've really helped us establish some important benchmarks in Santa Clara. First of all, more than ever, our residents are taking advantage of our parks and recreation facilities and programs in record numbers. In our wonderful award-winning library, our visitor and circulation counts continue to soar. And I know many of you are familiar with some of the library programs that are phenomenal. Our public utility rates are among the lowest in the Bay Area. And our public safety officers, police and fire and others, respond to thousands of calls each year. They make sure that Santa Clara is a safe place to live, work, and play and visit. And so this positive data was confirmed by a survey conducted in our city about 6 months ago. And we learned about some great numbers. First of all, 2/3 of Santa Clarans approve of their city government. And that's extraordinary considering the cynicism about government today. Our Public Works Department had a higher rating of 74%. Our Police Department was at 81%. Our libraries had a whopping 86% approval rating. Our Parks and Recreation Department was at 87%. And at the top, no surprise, was our fire department at an incredible 91%. It's clear from this data that Santa Clarans approve of their city government. Clearly, we're doing a good job managing in the present, but we also have a duty to manage for the future. We have a sacred duty to our sons, our daughters, our grandchildren, and future Santa Clarans and our residents. In order to fulfill that duty, we need a strong financial base. And so let me share some important information about our fiscal outlook. Revenues into our general fund increased in this past fiscal year. We built up reserves in our accounts that were depleted during the Great Recession a few years ago. In fact, since October of 2017, last year, nearly $70 million has been invested in our reserves. And more good news, when we started planning for this year's budget, we had an $8.5 million shortfall. But we were able to almost eliminate it without cuts in service, and really this is how we did it. We cut overhead costs in the city. We reduced our use of professional services in the city, and we corrected mistakes that were made to our CalPERS annual rates. So the bottom line, the good news is that we are in much better shape than we originally thought. And I want to thank our city management team for that terrific accomplishment. Thank you very much. They have done a spectacular job. So I'd like to introduce City Manager Deanna Santana. I don't want her to take a bow, although she deserves it, but I'd like her to say a few words. She and her team presented in January a really terrific and comprehensive review of our city for the City Council at our strategic goal setting session. I know we live streamed it. I don't know if any of you had the opportunity to look at that. I'm hoping it's still on our webpage here. And so I want her to share that information with you and all of our residents. Thank you.
Good morning. I just want to announce I'm a little under the weather, and I just ask for your patience as I get through a couple of slides. I wanted to offer a little bit of the detail and the walkthrough for the city's fiscal outlook, since it is critical to our future. And as I like to say, it is our number one goal, because from there, all of our strategies, all of our visions, and all of our strategic initiatives flow. So if one of the areas that I've been trying to emphasize with the council as well as the public is specific programs. Here, just looking at our operating budget, our capital projects, and our stadium authority dollars, you see that we have a $1.2 billion budget estimated. Now, that's significant for a city of our size. I can tell you I was the city administrator for a city of over 400,000, and their budget was similar. And so it really goes to show magnitude of the portfolio that we are managing here. From a fiscal outlook perspective, the four areas that are core to looking at our 10-year ahead are, of course, understanding our fiscal future, our expenditures and our cost control and management of them, our reserves and how we put one-time dollars aside to secure our future, as well as our revenue and growth strategies so that we can, of course, match the expenditure growth that we have. From a fiscal outlook perspective, a couple of changes that we've put in place. The first thing that we did in January is the council authorized us to look at our budget over a 2-year term so that we're not making decisions in a shorter term, which is year to year, not knowing where we're going in the longer term. We also transitioned from a 5-year forecast to a 10-year forecast because our changes in the last 5 years, if you look at government change from a fiscal perspective, it's generally more loaded on the out years, and you'll see this because of some of the CalPERS corrections that are looming out in our future. We also looked at where we could strategically invest one-time dollars so that we begin to secure stability in the future, particularly in some of our technology projects. And I'm happy to say that our IT director has joined us today, and we'll talk a little bit about the workload to catch up on some old systems that we need to immediately modernize in the near future. I wanted to share with you from a general fund resource perspective what makes up our tax base and our revenue base and how they are viewed from each category. And this is a very simple chart that shows on a sales tax, like every other local government, we're downward trending, and that's largely because of the remarkable and unpredictable way that retail is changing. Online purchases, how people aren't as active in the bricks and mortar type of retail, they're looking more online for their services, and that has disrupted our sales tax base. Property tax, of course, we're on an upward trend, much like the rest of the Silicon Valley. At TOT, we're flat, and it is heavily volatile, and it trends against the economy. This is the 5-year forecast that the mayor referred to when we walked in. We started with an $8.6 million deficit. The key message that I would like for you to walk away with is if you look at the out years, it really shows how the 2 fiscal years that are circled are really important to begin to stabilize what's coming. And what we wanted to do is understand what was coming in the next 5 years. With the council's support, they offered us the opportunity to put a 10-year forecast in place and begin using it as a policy document to make informed decisions, not only now, but also in the future. And you see here, through the changes that the mayor already expressed, we were able to get the deficit down to 1 million. Next year, we're looking at about 6 million. And the key thing is you start to see what the out years look like. That means we have 2 years to really get this right with respect to revenue opportunities and growth to mitigate any service reductions to the community, because we want to keep those percentages up, as the mayor just expressed. From expenditure control and management, I've talked about the deficit. What I think is important is we are underspending. We closed out last fiscal year with a surplus. We are due to close out this fiscal year with a surplus, and that allows for us to invest in key strategic areas that are meaningful to service delivery, that make us more efficient, and that also allow for us to save for the future. We did eliminate some positions in the proposed budget that the council is poised to consider on June 12th. You'll see that there's eliminations for positions in the city manager's office, the city council office, and in our public works department. And we are adding strategic positions that we think will make us more efficient and more diligent in how we manage contracts, public records requests, as well as risk. Risk, there's always exposure to us through financial consequences if we don't manage it. And frankly, I was surprised to see that we didn't have a risk manager in-house that can advise us on how to manage cost control areas, whereas other cities are able to. On our reserves, I think we've already demonstrated we've done very good. This is a city that is saving and that is putting dollars aside for strategic initiatives. Last year, we set aside $63.3 million. With the projected closeout of the fiscal year, we'll have roughly $14 million, of which some we will invest back into our reserves, looking for about $77 million over a 12-month period. Reserves are important to the city because they allow for us to do a couple of things. On the one hand, they allow for us to assemble dollars, basically saving for key projects. If there's a park that we want to redo, if there's an area of technology that we want to invest in, saving the dollars over time and making one expenditure allows for us to make those strategic investments. They're also good for unanticipated cost. There's grants that come up that are strategic and in the best interest of the city that sometimes require grant matches, meaning a fiscal match, and it allows for us to pull from our reserves so we can take advantage of grant opportunities. And you'll see us doing that over the next couple of months. There's also strategic expenditures that happen to come, or emergency repairs, some of which we've already had to invest in. And of course, based on council policy and qualifying events, there's always a need at times to invest in ongoing services with one-time dollars. I wanted to make sure, because it does seem unbelievable and contrary to what you may be hearing, that you understood how the dollars were set aside when we say that there's $77 million that's programmed for investment. We've drawn down, of course, and against what I just said are the purpose for drawing down of the reserves, but I wanted you to have that in your packet for full transparency so that the public knows what we're doing with public funds. From a revenue and growth perspective, we have some real opportunities. Thank you. We have some real opportunities. One is the City Place project, which is probably one of the most short horizon set of projects that come forward that allow for us to build our property tax, sales tax, and transit occupancy tax even more. It's important to understand that while there is a temptation to start to deliver on what are the numbers that are going to be added to the general fund, with the changing market, as particularly retail, it's also important to reevaluate first before we start putting out numbers. So I am reluctant to put out past numbers until I've done my due diligence with the developer to really then program how we would estimate in the out years the benefits of the development. Although it is clear there will be financial benefits. The council at its last meeting on Tuesday began to discuss some additional revenue opportunities that allow for us to invest in the community. One is cannabis tax, looking at how we could participate in a new emerging market under a regulated context and bring in additional revenue through cannabis tax. You'll be seeing a lot of deliberations on that over the next month. And the last is an infrastructure bond measure, which has been very, very intensely studied, and we'll be bringing forward portfolios of projects that we think might be the best balance for success at a bond measure in November. So there's some detail with respect to the City Place project. We like to call it City Place by the numbers because it is a very large scale project. A lot of times it's coined as the largest project west of the Mississippi, although some argue it's just west of New York. This is, and we say that because of all the other large scale projects in New York and the developers' activity in New York. But there's the City Place by the numbers. It does have residential units, about 1,700 or 700 hotel rooms. It's about 9.2 million square feet as a total project. And frankly, this is going to draw on a lot of city resources to make sure that we get the project on a right balance of how to move forward and that it is a successful project. And so it is a priority over the next fiscal year. And you can expect groundbreaking and activities of seeing construction later in 2019. Cannabis tax, what we estimated and have said publicly, is 1.2 to 2.4 million annually, and the council is still yet to determine the taxing methodology. That will be before the council over the next month. Included in your packet, I won't go over it, is just the projects that the council has studied that would fall under the bond measure. Our goal is to offer transparency as we get into the community of what projects or type of projects would be carried forward. I'll touch very quickly on the council policy priorities and some key activities that are happening under the 6 pillars that the council has put in place. They're in your packet. I'll go through one by one very quickly, and then we'll make ourselves available for questions and answers. So the first is to deliver high quality, efficient services and to understand our state of infrastructure. 2 main things that we have accomplished is the first is we've started to put in place an infrastructure assessment to know where we are and to begin to plan for critical investments to stabilize our infrastructure. We're like many other local governments and frankly the nation and states where we have deferred investment in infrastructure, and there is a financial program that we need to put in place. I think the city is doing relatively well with some of its plans, but we just need to better understand and have an assessment completed. Because of that, we are relaunching our My Santa Clara app. If you have a cell phone and you just look up My Santa Clara, you are able to have a real-time access to the service complaints or the concerns that have been expressed and our status of responding to them. It's an area where we want to focus more because it allows for us to communicate with residents through the form of an app and provide real-time information about how we're responding to issues surrounding infrastructure complaints, issues like graffitis, traffic lights, or garbage on the streets, or perhaps a water main break or things of that sort. We're also in process of doing a facility conditions inventory and assessment. And I think that's important because unlike this facility, many of our other facilities are somewhat aging and need some repairs. Maintain adequate staffing levels is a pillar of the City Council, and I think this is a strategic one because clearly our staff is the strongest asset, and it shows in the percentage of satisfaction with city deliveries. I have to say that it's important for us to monitor our staffing levels because walking into the organization, it became abundantly clear that the workload exceeds the capacity for staff to accomplish. And it's been something that we've been working to manage over the last 8 months as the new city staff joined. The refinement to the budget itself, going from an $8.5 million deficit to $1 million deficit, saved roughly about 40 to 50 jobs that we would have had to cut had we not gone through that due diligence effort. That is incredible because frankly, looking at the capacity that we have in place, it would have been really hard, we would have been hard pressed to look for 40 to 50 positions to eliminate. It's also important for us to look at training and continuing to sharpen our skills of our very talented staff. The world around us, and it starts here at the center of innovation and the center of what's possible, the world around us is changing very quickly. It's important to bring modern and fresh skills so that our staff can continue to offer high quality services. This is just for full transparency where and how staff are distributed throughout the organization. And what you'll see is if you just add up public safety and Silicon Valley Power, you will see that the majority of staff are concentrated in those two areas, and the rest of the staff are distributed for other services. I didn't neglect to put on the bottom, which is important for all of us to understand, is we really have three major lines of business as a city organization. We're small and mighty, and I think it really shows. We have Silicon Valley Power. Not many local governments have their own public utility. The City of Santa Clara, which is the traditional city portfolio, and then the Stadium Authority, which requires its own due diligence and staff support. Economic development and housing development. Very quickly, I'll just cover that two main points from this chart. Downtown revitalization. We are going to be holding a study session on June 12th, and we are very close to getting into agreements for Franklin Street, which allows for us then to begin to think how we would rebuild the downtown. The council is poised on June 12th to approve $400,000 for a precise plan, which means that from there we'll be able to assemble our community groups that are very active and interpret their vision through the precise plan process. I'm very excited about this. My understanding is that it had a long start, and I think this is a really critical opportunity to visualize and think through how we move forward with our downtown. I also want to call out, not on this chart, it's on the next one here, is the council was bold and advancing our interest in housing production and particularly affordable housing production. In about the November-December timeframe, the council approved an affordable housing policy which requires 15% on both the for sale as well as the rental market. That is higher than the surrounding cities, and we were successfully able to get that through both the developers as well as the community to advance the interest of our housing crisis here in the region. And as we grow, you will also see us active in the next fiscal year with launching a general plan update with robust community engagement. On the community sports and recreational assets, we've made a major investment on the Reed and Grand Street Sports Park, as well as there's one area that I want to talk about with respect to grants match and grants application. We recently just submitted a grants application for an all-inclusive park in Central Park, which is pretty much the more premier innovative type of park development. It allows for anyone of any disabilities to come and participate in a park setting. And you can see some already under development, one's complete in Palo Alto. And it's been earmarked as an investment from the county. They set aside $10 million worth of grant funds, and we're actively seeking some of those funds. And of course, our bookmobile. We launched a new bookmobile last year. I'm hoping you've seen it around town. I'm excited. When my voice is better, I'll be participating in the bookmobile karaoke, which is a great blend of just modern fun with our traditional bookmobile in an innovative state. And last, as the mayor already said, Measure J. We've done incredible work in this area. We have our comprehensive audit set the platform for transparency, fiscal reporting, understanding the flow of how our financials go through. We also have been able to set aside through the budget over $600,000 for the build out of a community room, which is we're getting through the process. We have real-time noise monitoring. On June 12th, we'll have the results of a robust community engagement process, which will be the voice of the community in terms of where we go next with respect to considering policy for the council to develop. And from an enhanced community engagement, look for us to put forward a new website in the July-August timeframe. We've been working very hard to make our website more user-friendly for the community and so that we can push out more information. I've already talked about the relaunch of My Santa Clara. That's already underway. I'm hoping you take the time to review that. And last, just when you thought we didn't have any other new programs for residents, we are fundraising for a Working Scholars program. We already introduced this within our organization for our employees. If you're not familiar with this program, let me just share. It is an online way for residents to get free bachelor's degrees. We get grant funding, and we've been able to launch this in other regional cities. But it allows for our residents to stay fully skilled and to acquire educational attainment at their pace online from accredited colleges. And we have the interest of our business community. You'll see this rolling out over the next year. And from protecting our environment, we are going to be re-evaluating and updating our climate action plan. I can take credit that we already went from eliminating our coal power as a source of energy, and our renewable energy program for Santa Clara Green Power has moved to 100% solar power. These are incredible moves in a 12-month period of time, and it really shows the interest of the city of Santa Clara on sustainability. Here's a quick snapshot of what's ahead. No surprises here, some I've already mentioned. I'll just mention that one of the core services for public safety is a modern, well-functioning computer-aided dispatching system. We are in process of renewing that, along with 34 other IT projects that are underway. We're going to be onboarding, obviously, new council members in November. We'll bring a program for them to get up to speed very quickly so that they can come in with all of the information that they need to make informed decisions. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to the mayor, and she can close up the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Deanna. I thought yesterday you were in bed and weren't able to make it. You made it through quite well. I was a little worried at the end there, but you did it. So congratulations. Congratulations. So thank you for that comprehensive presentation. I really like the analogy of the pillars because pillars are a symbol of strength. And I think that's what we're here to talk about today, the strength of Santa Clara. It's important because of our city leadership here, our city management, and most importantly, our residents. I can proudly say that as mayor of Santa Clara, I can say that our city, the state of our city is very strong. It's very strong. So now we'll be happy to answer any questions you'd like to ask us from the audience. Either I can answer, city manager, or one of our council experts here on an area. So if we can get the microphone, if you'd like to come up and ask a question, please feel free to do so, and we'll make sure the proper person answers it. So would you like to bring it a little forward in the middle? Thanks. Thank you so much. Welcome.
Thank you for doing this. It's good for people to know what's going on. I had a couple of questions. I had heard rumors that City Place had lost some anchor tenants, and I was just curious as to what the status of that is, if that project is going to be redesigned at all. And my second question is, and I'm sorry, I attend a fair number of council meetings, but I've lost track. There was thought of hiring a professional manager for the Stadium Authority. Where are we with that?
Okay, our city manager can answer. I can start on the City Place, and you can talk about the Stadium Authority. In terms of City Place, the original design was for including department stores on City Place, and that was a few years ago. That was the retail strategy at that time. Well, as we all know, and I'm sure our city manager can elaborate on this, retail has changed, and the larger department stores are not the financial, doesn't obtain the financial return anymore because of all the online shopping. So it's not that they've lost tenants, it's just the retail strategy has changed in terms of the smaller retail tenants along with food and beverage are going to be the main drivers on the City Place development. But I'll let our city manager answer that because she has had several meetings with the City Place developers talking about their retail strategy. And I know we're going to have a special section of an upcoming council meeting to talk about their new retail strategy. But City Manager, and then you can answer the Stadium Authority question.
The mayor is absolutely correct in that the development depended on a couple of large anchor stores, and the trend nationally is that many of the anchor stores that were profiled as part of the concept are actually closing stores nationally. And so they have recreated and are in process of recreating what their strategy is going to be. What's important is because retail is changing so quickly that they stay ahead of the curve so that when the project is delivered, it is matched to what is available from a local economy as well as from an economic trend. On the Stadium Authority side, that is true that I did ask for the council to establish a Stadium Authority manager. However, what I also, once I got my feet on the ground here, I determined that much of the work is related to city work in terms of land use, policy, oversight. The good thing is in-house we have the skill sets, and we were able to save resources by filling the position with a more functioning analyst that provides the support. My own background as a city administrator for the city of Oakland, I acquired skills of overseeing 3 professional sports teams through the Coliseum and the arena and working with the county on that. So I felt that I, along with my chief operating officer, that we had the expertise in-house to maintain that portfolio, as well as by adding an analyst to allow for us to have support, and which saved dollars in the end. So that's the strategy. I think it's working because many of the issues with response to governance are interrelated between the city's oversight as well as what the facility requires.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, sir. Please come forward.
Hi, I'm Frank Lemon, a nearby resident, actually. I wish this was taller.
There should be a way to pull it up,
Yeah. Let me
pull
see
it
if I
off.
can pull it off without breaking it.
Assistance?
I'm going to have to just hunch over. I think maybe that's the best we can do. Okay, gosh, there's so much I'd like to talk to you, but I know other people and yourselves have other...
There you go.
Thank you.
They're more comfortable now.
Yeah. And I want to express my appreciation for all of you making this available. It's been great. Also want to put in a plug for the excitement for reclaiming our downtown. We're excited to hear that you're excited. And we look forward to working with the council and the manager and everybody else to make that a reality. Recently, 2 weeks ago, I went to the Genzon Kylie open house about the Harmony development planned for the Yahoo property on Tasman. And I was expecting to be awed. My jaw dropped. I couldn't believe the scale of that project. And I think, along with City Place, we're looking at projects that are unprecedented in the South Bay in terms of density, size, ambition, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things that concerned me was when I talked with some of the Kylie staff there about infrastructure and schools and transportation, parking, congestion, they had no good answers. And I'm deeply concerned that with projects of this scale, that we're already operating at a projected deficit. How are we going to provide the basic infrastructure services that people will need? We're talking about 6,000 living units at Kylie, at the Kylie development. So I just worry that we might be giving away too much. We shouldn't be operating at a deficit with that type of growth rate. So I want to encourage the council and all staff to really watch out for the interest of Santa Clara, because otherwise we could really get the short end. I'm very excited about the possibility of seeing developments like this, but I'm also concerned about the high-rise aspects of them, because as we've seen on certain areas of El Camino, we almost have lost our skyline. And that's just with 6 and 7 stories. Kylie's talking about putting in a 40-story high-rise along with 3 or 4 other skyscrapers of lesser height, but that's going to be clearly visible for miles. And I just don't see the point or purpose of having a 40-story skyscraper on the border of Sunnyvale and Santa Clara. Initially, they were projecting 60 stories, and I think they already realized maybe that's a little too ambitious. But I'm wondering if you could comment about some of the large-scale plans like this and how we will benefit from the plans to provide the services we need.
Thank you. That's some very good questions and very topical since they just had that public outreach meeting. That particular project, for those of you who don't know, is it's about 49 or 50 acres, the old Yahoo site. Yahoo had that property approved for a development, what, 10 years ago, Teresa? 10. I think Teresa was on the Planning Commission at the time. About 10 years ago, they approved a 3 million square foot development on that property. So that's the approval on that site right now, is for a 3 million. It was going to be a headquarters there, Yahoo, or office complex. So that site has turned over a couple of times and now is owned by Genzon, and they've entitled their property, that project, the Kylie project, and they're proposing, I think, 9 or 10 or more million square feet of high rises, as you described. A lot of the projects in that area, like for instance the City Place project and others, were approved with environmental documents looking at that Genzon site as a 3 million square foot development. So anything above and beyond that 3 million square feet is not accounted for anywhere. So the council, we can't comment on the specific project because it'll come before us and we don't want to conflict ourselves out of, based on any comments that we made. But I can just tell you, generally speaking, that there's one thing about approving developments in an area like that, on paper they may look good, but in for practical purposes, if we put massive developments on the north side, and I'm talking massive developments, we are going to create absolute gridlock and no one will be able to get in or out of that area. And not only that, we have to remember with all our developments, and I know I can speak for myself and I know by comments from our council members, we don't want to lose Santa Clara in everything we do. And we have to look at these projects and really look at, does this contain Santa Clara's identity, and really think about who's going to live in those projects, who's going to live in those apartments, what's their quality of life going to be like? Because the project, as described, is unlike anything we've ever seen here. And so there are so much to take into consideration and account, like our schools, for instance. Because of the increase in residential development on the north side, there's going to be a need for schools. People have children. Don't ask a developer, they'll say they don't have any children, but they do. People have children that need schools. And so maybe our schools are not going to be the traditional 10-acre elementary and 25-acre middle school and 50-acre high school. They may be a 3-acre, high 2 or 3 story urban school. Things are going to change in terms of the way it looks, but the fact is we need the public services. We need police and fire to be able to service these areas. We need parks. We need library expansions or new libraries. So we take all that into consideration in terms of these high density developments. And unless Teresa can find out a way to fix the traffic problem as VTA, because we're all relying on her at this point, no pressure. We have to look at these developments realistically, because anyone can come in here. And I've found throughout the last few years, Santa Clara is an attractive place. Everybody wants to develop here. And when we put in a new park fee, they said, oh, developers aren't going to come because they don't want to pay the fee. No, they pay the fee and they come. And so we put in our affordable housing fee. They're still coming. So we have a product that they want, and I think we have to really do a much better job, and we do a good job, but a much better job of getting community benefits from these projects. So that particular project, all I can tell you, it's only approved for 3 million square feet. Anything above and beyond that is going to take extreme scrutiny. So, yes. You can pull it down now, Wes.
First of all, I want to thank you for coming to my old junior high school. Of course, back when I graduated in '72, we were the Juan Cabrillo Conquistadors. Now they're the Cougars. And I'm a hardcore Raider fan, but I want to know what's going on with the 49ers.
Are you talking about the play or
The 49ers today.
or the money?
So is the situation getting better with the 49ers? They worked it out? Because my little brother lives right there by Great America, and the traffic, when they have events and the noise, it gets to be a bit much. But and especially the VTA, it's like when the VTA comes in for games, and if there's an incident, they actually have to stop the train while they call the sheriffs, and it can be a very mess. Have they figured out better solutions in terms of entering and leaving during events?
Thank you, Wes. We have a lot of issues that we're working out through the years in terms of transportation, in terms of managing not only game day, but non-NFL events, in terms of neighborhoods, protecting the neighborhoods from cars parking in the neighborhoods. And it's an ongoing process for us. We did do this, as the city manager had mentioned, a massive outreach to our community and polling them in many different ways, focus groups, polls, to see what kind of real impact the stadium is having on the surrounding neighborhoods, and then what we can do to fix it. So in terms of, we get emails, we get calls, we get complaints, all the time. But what we're trying to do now is base any of our preventative measures or any of our decisions on data that we receive. So we're making data-based decisions now on how we protect our neighborhoods from stadium activities, because a lot of promises were made when we passed Measure J. A lot of promises were made to the community, and it's our job to make sure that those promises are kept and that there's accountability for what's happened. We just don't want to turn our back. So it's a tough process, and many times the 49ers are helpful, other times they're not helpful at all, and they're not accountable to us. So it's our job to protect the community, to protect the neighborhoods, and deal with those complaints. For instance, the complaints there was a complaint line, it used to go directly to the 49ers. Well, of course, in the 4.5 or 5 years, we have not received a single complaint about the stadium. So if you ask them, there's no complaints. So we're changing that, and we're gonna have a complaint line either come to the city or a third party, so that we can get real-time complaints on what's happening, because the information they were giving us and what the actual complaints that were happening, they didn't match. So we're working through that now, and it's not as quick as we'd like it to be, but we're doing our best to make sure we're responsive to the neighborhood and that we're able to handle all those complaints you talked about. Thank you. Yes, hi, Lori.
What impacts are we as residents likely to experience if we, the voters, fail to pass any new tax sources?
I might have the city manager answer that too, but we have so many needs. You can talk specifically. We have so many needs in Santa Clara in terms of infrastructure and others. I think that one's a little bit more, well, they're all important, but very important for us. The cannabis tax is something that if we end up putting it on the ballot, that's going to be to just really offset our costs. And for not only administration, but also public safety, offset the cost. But the infrastructure tax, if we do go ahead with that, it's incredibly important for us. Deanna, I don't know if you want to add on to that.
So I included the chart of how staff is distributed throughout the organization, and as you see, largely on Silicon Valley Power and public safety. Any staff reductions would need to come distributed and particularly focused in the general fund, which is, of course, public safety and the non-Silicon Valley Power and other special funds. So we would see some hard cuts there. What's important, though, is also that, like many other local governments that deferred project investments on infrastructure during the recession, a lot of that is beginning to catch up. It's the reason why we have 34 IT projects underway right now, as well as a CAT update, because as soon as there were dollars, we immediately began to invest in those projects. So projects like infrastructure improvements, other delayed investments would have to be put into place. And there's only so much before you have to start closing things down or doing emergency repairs, which can often be more costly than pre-planned and proactive repairs. So between staffing, infrastructure, and facilities, those would be where you would see impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Just to add on to that, a lot of our infrastructure is aging. I don't know, many people remember the sinkhole on Scott Boulevard near El Camino for a while, just all of a sudden one day. So those are the types of things we're trying to avoid in the future. Hi, Karen.
Karen Hardy. I've got it down to just 3 things. Isn't that good? One of the things I've noticed is on game day, whenever there's an event, we talked about how it's stopping our VTA. You've got so much pedestrian, and with the major parking being across the street, why have we not put in a pedestrian bridge that also connects to the VTA, to the light rail right there, and gets the traffic across there? Because I've noticed that is a big problem.
Want me to
Next
talk about,
one.
Okay, I'll wait. Go ahead.
When I helped on the Planning Commission to design Rivermark, there was one problem. We did a lot of things right, I think, and you can see how it works, and a lot of people say that's a great place to be. But there's one big problem that if I could go back, we would have fixed, and that's that the numbers the school district gave us for how many children there would be were completely off. And Don Calajon, the minute it opened up, was too full. And so I think we need to look at what projections are, but we need to look at the projections versus the reality when we talk about new developments and what school and infrastructure you would need, because in my experience, that has been downplayed. As you said, they think you have no children. Well, it's not even more that, there's more than we thought. And the last one, when we have records requests at the city, I'm surprised at how few things are online and how difficult it is for staff to find numbers and find records. And I'm curious if that part of the IT you talk about is taking care of that, because it's almost embarrassing to be in the middle of Silicon Valley and be looking for pieces of paper in old boxes.
Thank you. I'll leave that third one to the city manager. That's probably the toughest one. I know we're redoing our website and other things. So the first was a pedestrian bridge over Tasman, and that, as you're aware, on game day and other major event days, they close Tasman. So the Tasman is closed to vehicular traffic, but the pedestrians cause the delays of the VTA. The pedestrian bridge, what's the holdup? Nobody wants to pay for it. That's the big holdup in a nutshell. It wasn't approved with the city place development, so I know it's on the study now for the VTA. It's on the study list for the Valley Transportation Authority, so it's not an issue that's died. It's on the study list, so it's going to probably, in realistic purposes, it's going to have to be a combination of all the stakeholders in the area that get together that pay for that bridge, because one entity on its own will not be able to fund it. It's in the millions and millions of dollars. So that's still being talked about. In fact, I talked about it with the city manager and Teresa yesterday. So we're still talking about that. And the second question was, oh my gosh. Oh, the schools. Okay, you're preaching to the choir here, because in all the developments, and you're absolutely right, Rivermark was the first sort of mixed-use development that we approved in Santa Clara in 2000. And so once that development was approved, and it wasn't at the highest density, we're approving much higher densities now, but it was such a wonderful concept for Santa Clara that it sold out, and the schools and families moved in, and it's just being crushed by its own success right now. And that Calajon School was started as a K-8, I think, Teresa, pre-K-8. And so it's wonderful to live and have retail around your neighborhood school. So the numbers are just incredible. As we look at these developments, here's what happens realistically for us. The developers will bring a project. Here's 200 units for Santa Clara, apartments or for sale units, and they'll say, we went to the school district and took the school district's numbers. And the school district's numbers say that for these 200 units in the next 5 years, you'll have 3 children. And so we say, that makes no sense whatsoever. And they will point to the school district and say it's their demographic, it's their numbers that say that. Well, we all know in real life that's not going to happen. And so we have been successful in asking developers, because we can't mandate anything for the school district, but asking developers to voluntarily put double the school fees so that it gets the district at least a little bit closer to preparing for these new students in the district. So because we have a really good working relationship with Santa Clara Unified School District. So we are realistically looking at it, and we're looking for ways, especially on the north side, to site some new schools, because that's where our major growth is in the city. But it's legally, we don't have any rights to do it, but the developers know that it's important to us, and so many of them go directly to the district and negotiate paying higher fees. And even the higher fees they pay at the double the fee, because when they come in, the statutory fees they only cover about a third of what is actually needed. So the developers know that, well, if you're going to come to Santa Clara, that it's very favorable if you work out something with the district, but I don't think that we're properly planning for the future, but it's really on our radar. We ask with it for every development. And then Deanna, on the third issue.
I've worked for 4 different local governments, and San Jose, Oakland, Sunnyvale, and Santa Clara. I can say that this is a highly active community on Public Records Act request, and the amount of capacity that we have to dedicate is extraordinary. And because we have mostly manual systems, our contract management is a manual process. We only recently streamlined from a manual council agenda process to a paperless process. The cost for us to produce the responsive records is very high. And we do have a proposal in the budget so that we can bring in a public records coordinator. We're basically switching it out from a vacancy to a public records coordinator so that we can bring down the cost of providing responsive documentation, but also modernize. If you look at other organizations, many times there's software that we can put in place that once we respond to one records request, we're able to upload that information so that a resident can scan and look at past requests and the responsive documents. Because we provide manual information here, we're just not able to yet get there. But it is something through the public records coordinator that is our goal in the short term once we get the person on board. So it's going to take some time, and it's a reflection of our manual processes that we have to transition from still.
I'm back. I warned you. I also want to put in a plug for the app reissue. I have personally used the app a couple of times, and actually the city responded to have weeds that were unsightly weeds removed from the sidewalk on Freedom Circle near where I work based on a request I put in. So thank you very much. It's been noticed. 2 other questions I wanted to ask this morning. The first is I didn't see any mention on the slides or presentation about plans for the International Swim Center. And I know at one time there was discussion about a major redevelopment of that site for a new swim center. So I'm curious, is that still in the works or just dry docked right at the moment or whatever? Second question, and this issue comes up a lot around town and online. Is the city engaging with Caltrans to aggressively invoke them to resurface the bad areas of El Camino Real? Because there are some humongous potholes out there that people are complaining about constantly, and we would love to see those get resurfaced.
Okay, thanks. Yes, and I think I'll talk to city manager, talk about the Caltrain issue, and I'll start on the swim center. The swim center, we had proposals from the swim club about a new swim center and a swim hall of fame that was, I'll call it the Cadillac model, was over 200 million. I mean, it started at 60, and I don't know why, but it ended up over 200 million. And it was beautiful, big, beautiful, but the council looked at it and decided that it was a little too much and that we needed to right size this swim center and the development of the swim center, and that's one of the projects that we're looking at to be included in the infrastructure bond for possibly for November, because we don't have the money to be able to do that, but it's obvious. I think all the showers are out at the swim center. It's an old facility. I mean, I remember when I was this big going there, and it looks exactly the same. They've done some improvements, some Band-Aid improvements over the years, but we're going to have to do something. That's a very popular swimming pool, and it's world-renowned and very popular with our residents, from babies taking swim classes all the way up to the competitive swim team. So it's definitely a community jewel, but we're being realistic about what we can and can't do, what we can and can't afford, what the public will be able to tolerate in terms of rebuilding the swim center. So we're taking that all into consideration right now and looking at that as possibly part of the bond for November. So Deanna, in terms of the Caltrains and the Public Works road.
Happy that you brought that up. We are actively working with Caltrans on improvements along El Camino. We're in the design state, and so that does take some time, but there should be some activity in 2019.
Okay. Anyone else? Please come forward. Hello.
Hi, and thank you for this session today. I wanted to endorse the Public Records Coordinator. During the time we transitioned from paper to electronics records keeping at the City of San Jose, I was working there, and it was quite a remarkable transformation, and I'm sure that if we did the same thing here at Santa Clara, it would work really well and serve the citizens well. And I wanted to kind of toss out a random comment. Since the Moonlight Center is close by here, we've seen how retail has transformed in recent years with the closure of the Save Mart store, the Office Max store, Radio Shack, and even several other ones, including the bowling alley. So I'm sure that's quite a challenge for the city to kind of manage that, because those were places that we shopped at regularly and frequently, and now they're simply not there. And so I was kind of wondering if there's any particular plans for, excuse me, for the Moonlight Center that you can share with us as an example of what might be in the works right now.
Okay, thank you. We're all familiar with the Moonlight Center. It's pretty much in the center of our town, and that's an important retail corner there. We were all upset when the Save Mart closed and the other businesses. It's obvious that the property owner, which we don't own that property, but it's obvious the property owner has plans for future development at that property. To my knowledge, I don't think we have any applications. City Manager, do you know, Manuel, anyone? I don't think anything has been submitted for that property, but it really looks like they're not trying to entertain any long-term leases on that property. I mean, I can only tell you from the council's perspective that that is an important retail corner. We do need retail services. We all talk about the success of the Santa Clara, the Target Center, what is the Town Center, Santa Clara, not Santa Clara Square, Santa Clara Town Center, how popular that is. And, I'm there almost every lunchtime picking up something over there. And we need those all over town because we need the neighborhood commercial services. So I personally would fight to keep that a commercial, even if it's a mixed-use commercial in that area. But no one's proposed anything yet for that corner. But we're all looking at it and watching it because it doesn't look good now. It's not a good reflection of our city, and I'm hoping that something will come forward soon. We're also interested in, we've engaged in placemaking efforts in Santa Clara, and so we're looking at each development as to what kind of public space they can give back to the community, and that's a perfect example of an area where a public space is needed in that particular area. So we're watching it, but we don't have a handle on anything at this point, at this time. That was a good question, though. Anyone else?
I guess if you're allowing seconds, I'll come back. I wanted to put in a plug the Old Quad Residents Association and Reclaiming Our Downtown are having a public meeting, an information meeting on the Franklin Street easement and the sort of our visions for the downtown. That will be Thursday, June 7th at 7 p.m. at the Senior Center. So anyone who wants to attend that. And then this is actually the first that I've heard that we're actively working on a general plan update. We have probably 6 or 7 specific area plans, and we're doing a zoning update. I'd like to understand how all of those are going to work together, because I think there's going to be some overlap, and when are we going to start the first general plan update outreach meetings?
Thank you. I don't know if you can answer that. I know we're busy on the specific plan, so, City Manager.
We're getting ready for a general plan update, which doesn't mean that we're actively working on it. So you will see in the next fiscal year the plan to begin to do the general plan update. It is something that came out of the priority session last January and continues to need attention. And so we need to make sure that we have the right resources in place and that we have community engagement well planned out for. And so it is something we're working on.
Okay, anyone else? Last call. Although you can come at 2 o'clock to the community center if you think of something else. Yes.
Mayor, congratulations, first of all. It is just heartening and wonderful to realize that we are being led by people whose hearts are solidly anchored for the residents of the city of Santa Clara. That's wonderful to hear.
Thank you.
As evidence, you said that you emphasize, the city council emphasizes quality of life over money, and in the city manager's presentation, revenue was the bottom. The other aspects of managing the city, including reserves, were top of the agenda. So that's wonderful evidence that that philosophy is being put into place. I have a question regarding security in the city. As you know, I'm a participant in the Leadership Santa Clara course, and when we went through the police and fire department areas, it appeared from the data that the level of, let's pick burglaries, for example, has remained relatively constant over, let's say, a 5-year period, which is probably not bad, but I'd also like to know how many of those are actually being solved. In other words, are we getting better at solving these incidents that occur, and what are we doing for physical security, but also as a subtext, data security as well. I understand that we're making lots of changes. That's great. We need to utilize technology better. But with that advance, there's also the downside there that city residents' data might be compromised one day. So just those two aspects, the physical security as well as the data security for our city. If you could comment and let us know what's being done. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I know we don't have our chiefs here today, but we have our Chief Information Officer and City Manager. I know protecting our citizens' information is key for us, and I know we're updating our CAD system in the police department and others to make sure, because security breach of security is extremely important to us. I don't know, Deanna, if you can talk about that, but in terms of the crimes, I think what concerns me, the council, and others, we have an increase in property crimes in Santa Clara, and it's the car break-ins, it's the theft of packages, it's those things are happening all over. And I know that we're looking at our staffing levels in the police department, and really the workload of the police department leaves us some time, but not enough time to work on preventative measures for security in our city. So that's an ongoing conversation with us on how we can keep our citizens safe, your property safe, your person safe, and your data safe. So I'm going to pass it over to the city manager.
So in terms of Solve Rate, I'd like to push out information through the city manager blog. It's available online, and you can certainly subscribe to it. It's information I don't have handy, but we can look at last year, and I'm looking over on this side just to track it for me. We'll push some information out there. Over, I believe on June 26th, in our upcoming council meeting, the chief will be coming forward with his efforts to actually work with the Silicon Valley Community Foundation on polling within the community around issues of concern, and we'll have data, again, to bring to the council for future consideration on policymaking in this type of area in terms of how are we doing with response to crime and our community relations. I have to say, though, we have been vigilant around getting the word out. We are, because Santa Clara is a prime location and community, people like to come here for burglaries, and it's kind of common around our neighboring cities as well. I don't know if you've had the opportunity, but what they have taken to start to do is in parking lots where in our shopping centers, our staff is actually leaving flyers on cars. I had one the other day when I was in a shopping center to make for greater awareness of what you can do to keep your assets safe, whether when you're in your car or at home. And we do try to push out as much information through Nixle and Nextdoor, and we can always do better. But I would stay tuned for my 90, and I'll push out some information on Solve right through the blog.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Have to say something. Years ago, when we first saw some of the original plans for City Place, they talked a lot about, bike lanes, and a lot of people know that I bike commute every day to work, and I actually don't even see very good bike paths in the streets that would get to City Place. Yeah, we have the San Tomas Aquino Trail, but then that's blocked off on event days, so.
We're still working on opening that.
Okay.
Yes, we are.
Lafayette would be a great street for a lot of bikers, and yet there isn't even a bike lane. As everyone knows, I got hit by a truck on Lafayette in a wide open piece of
Was that
of
in
the
Santa
street.
Clara or San Jose?
In Santa Clara. That was the first time. The other one was San Jose. What's amazing to me is when I ride to work, I ride from Santa Clara briefly into San Jose and then into Milpitas. And as soon as I hit San Jose, all of a sudden there's bike lanes, and they're green marked bike lanes. And you don't see that in Santa Clara. It's even Tasman, yeah, you guys made all these nice bike lanes in front of the stadium, but they're not even marked with all the green markings. And then as soon as you cross the Guadalupe and you hit San Jose, it's green bike lanes. And it's amazing that that Santa Clara isn't as bike friendly as San Jose. Then Milpitas gets bad again, but that's way out there, So I wish that be a little bit more thinking of bike lanes, because it's going to be very difficult to get to down Tasman to City Place and all of this stuff, and it might help a lot if a little bit more consideration for the cyclists.
I'm going to ask Councilmember Teresa O'Neill if she wouldn't mind coming up and talking about this, since she is the expert and chair of our Bicycle Advisory Committee. I'm sorry to put you on the spot, Teresa, but I thought you would be the best one to answer this question.
Okay, well, thank you.
comment.
Thanks for that question, Carl, and you actually have probably a higher level of dedication than I do. I mean, yes, I did break my leg on a bike, but you've been hit several times, so, the fact that I admire that you still are out there pedaling away. So the first thing, I'll touch a little bit like on that whole area, and I agree with you, and our BPAC agrees with you very much. Santa Clara, as with many things, relies heavily on grant funding, like completely almost completely, not totally, for our pedestrian and cyclist infrastructure. And, so we have had plans, we have looked at Lafayette Street and all that, and once again, it's getting the funding. So when you're talking about Tasman, that was a project that the BPAC really supported. And depending on who you talk to, there's on the whole thing about how much green paint you put down, there's a school of thought that says that if you use the green too much, that the mental impact of people that's a bike lane wears off. I mean, so it's almost like if you use the green more sporadically, it draws attention to it. I don't know, but that was some of the thinking. I think probably it was a budgetary issue, but I know in other areas you'll notice, like if you're on Calabasas or if that, in some of that area, and you'll see green, or even up like on Stevens Creek Boulevard near like Lawrence Expressway where the Agilent campus, you'll see an area of green, and then it kind of pass it, or fades out, and that's because of some of what they think is the psychological impact of only using the green for impact. We don't want car impacts though. In terms of City Place and getting out there, there is a fairly elaborate plan that the developers put in place. VTA is looking at it. We're looking at this whole coming up sometime in the next couple of months to the council will be a multimodal transportation plan for City Place that the City Council and the VTA board is going to have to agree on. And there are aspects also, a lot of that is intersection improvements, but it's the kind of things that we're talking about. Like, I think Karen Hardy was channeling Nuria Fernandez, the GM of VTA. Where is my, pedestrian overpass? But part of that is that to put much better bicycle infrastructure in that area, and obviously we have to have connectivity to that. So in the coming months, as we look at further developing that transportation plan, we do have to really look at some of those things. I've talked about, I'd love to see some kind of trail that, if there's enough space, like that would go from the kind of like Santa Clara, I call it Santa Clara's High Line, a sectioned off trail that would go from like the Caltrain station along the railroad tracks out to Great America area. And because I think one of the things that we have to look at more aggressively is like, I rode my bike up here, up Kiley from where I live, and I hate riding on Kiley because there's, even on a Saturday morning, cars are, too close for comfort. So a lot of our streets, unfortunately, don't, unless we go to road diets on all of them, we don't have space for full bike lanes. But, so we need to be looking at where are there other areas, even in neighborhoods like this, that where you could accommodate what would be like some kind of mini bike highway, or like I said, a path that would parallel railroad tracks, or to look more creatively at areas that are underutilized that could be areas for bikes and peds only.
Thank you, Teresa. I want to add 2 points. The first is we are currently underway on a bike master plan. There is a separate website dedicated, or a page dedicated to the activity on updating the bicycle master plan. And in your packet, under the infrastructure bond measure, I think it's on site 18, there is a line item, if it is successful in going through, for parks and trails for $50 million. That would be, that's the original number. Of course, it would need to be refined as the council establishes policy in this area.
Thank you. Last call, 3 times. Okay, Suds, you do need to come at 2 o'clock.
This is only a comment. I'm pleased that the city manager mentioned the master plan. I encourage Carl and everybody else to go to the website and put in the places where you think that there are problems in our city, and then that will go into the master plan. So I've already put in like a dozen comments. So I'm encouraging everyone to go in and put in sections where you want trails and you want improvements.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Okay. Anyone else? Well, thank you very much for attending our very first State of the City in the Neighborhoods. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And there's still food and drink.